Today we tell the story of Norwell Roberts, who became the first black policeman to join London's Metropolitan Police in 1967. He was put forward as a symbol of progressive policing, but for decades faced endemic racism from within the force.
They asked me, why do you want to join the police force? I said, well, I want to help people, and it's a secure job. But I had a particularly rough time. I suppose if people had warned me, I may have had second thoughts about it. I don't know. But because no one warned me, I learnt on the job, shall we say. And I came through it. But nobody should be subject to that treatment, ever.
Norwell Roberts, born Norwell Gums, was 9 years old when he came to England from Anguilla in the Caribbean in the 1950s. His mum, a young widow, had secured a job in England as a housemaid. They were part of the Windrush generation, citizens of the British Empire who came to the UK from the Caribbean to work and rebuild the country after the Second World War. But their arrival was met with hostility from many.
It's probably true to say that any non-white person in Britain is liable to encounter discrimination in finding a job or somewhere to live.
They're really horrible to work with. They're horrible.
As more and more of them come into the country, it must get worse.
I think they should live in a district all to themselves because they're not clean.
Why not keep Britain, keep it white as it should be?
Norwell and his mum first lived in the suburban town of Bromley in Kent.
I was certainly one of about the first black people in Bromley. When I went to school, the sixth formers dropped me on my head to see the colour of my blood. There's a scar there. I guess they found out it was red. But eventually we moved to London, Camden Town. I went to school there in Haverstock School. And it was mixed boys, girls, and there were black people there were Asians. I think I got on well with everybody. It was good. I enjoyed it. I can honestly say that I wasn't aware of any racism there.
But at 16, Norwell was kicked out of the family home by his mum's new husband. He found work as a lab technician. It was then that Norwell saw an ad in the newspaper.
And it said, London needs more policemen. And it didn't say black policemen or Asian policemen, it just said more policemen.
Back in the Caribbean, he had family who'd been in the police, but he said he applied just for a laugh. After all, the Metropolitan Police did not have black officers.
I wasn't thinking of, my grandfather and my uncles were policemen, I want to be a policeman. It wasn't like that at all. It's just something that I just saw it, thought I would try.
Did you think you'd be accepted?
No. Good God, no. I didn't think I'd be accepted at all. I thought I joined as a joke. They're going to be laughing too.
But to his surprise, he made it through selection and was sent to the Hendon Police Training College. It was big news in Britain.
During the 13 weeks there, on several times, I'd be called out. My class would be called out. A photographs taken by the press because, of course, I was the first black policeman in London. A celebrity.
After 13 weeks, he passed out of training and was assigned to start his 2-year probationary service at Bow Street Police Station in central London, near Covent Garden. It was 1967, and aged just 21, Norwell looked forward to his first day at work.
That was exciting, but when I went to my first station, Bow Street, my reporting sergeant, the first words he said, when I met him, he said, "Look you I'll see to it that you never pass your probation."
Police chiefs outwardly presented Norwell as an example of progressive policing, and yet, in reality, from his own colleagues, he faced racial abuse, harassment and persecution.
Whilst I was there, I had buttons ripped off my uniform. I had matchsticks in the keels of my car. Half-crown is a coin with serrated edge. They would run it down the side of my car. My tyres were slashed, and my car was towed away on several occasions, which I had to collect and pay up to get it. Now, I'd go over there in full uniform to collect the car. My car, and I suppose they thought it was funny at the time. I wasn't laughing, obviously. But that's all part of growing up.
And when he came back to the station, Norwell was shunned by his colleagues.
It wasn't a done thing to like me, I don't know if you can understand. It wasn't. If you were seen talking to me, you'd be ostracised by the rest of the policemen. One of the older officers, and he was really a bully. And the other policemen were frightened of him, and he would tell them not to talk to me. One thing that I found very sad is that a couple of policemen who came out of training school with me, they would talk to me back at the section house where we all lived. But when we got to work, they wouldn't, because it wasn't a done thing. And clearly they weren't made of the stuff that I was made of. But they had to side with the others against me to survive.
So you're on your own?
Yeah. Yeah, I was completely on my own. Completely. At the end of the shift, I'd go back to the section house and I would cry. I would go to the bath and cry because of my treatment. That was my release. Nobody knew because I'd cry in the bath. I'd go to the bathroom, run the water and just splash about and cry, but nobody knew what was happening. But that's the way I dealt with it. I wanted to be liked. I just wanted to be accepted. They used to play cards in the canteen and I wouldn't be allowed to join in. But once they got me to join in, I lost a lot of money, lost a few pennies, but I didn't care. Losing money was a small price to pay, as I was then felt part of the group.
At the time, the police's relations with black, British and Asian communities were notoriously bad. In part, they reflected wider racist attitudes expressed by some in the white community towards ethnic minorities. But for Norwell, the one solace it seemed was that out on the streets, the public seemed less hostile than his colleagues.
In so much I was having a rough time at Bow Street, when I left the police station, went out on the streets, I got on so well with the market porters. They were really lovely. I used to take fruit home. They used to give me fruit home to take home. I got on well with members of the public. I really did. It's in my life, I always have time to talk to people because you never know what they're thinking, what they're going through, and how just talking to them can help them. I wish I had someone to talk to me at the time, put their arms around me and say, I know what you're going through. I think at the time it was so horrible when I was at the police station, I didn't really want to go in for grub, because you'd have to go in for grub for 3/4 of an hour for your refreshments. But because I was having such a nice time out in the streets, I'd rather go around someone's house for a cup of tea. Because members of the public did ask me in for a cup of tea. You know, I said, come in for a cup of tea any time. And I did.
But even out on the streets, he did not escape abuse from his fellow officers. And for the first time, Norwell decided to take action.
I was outside Covent Garden Opera House. Sunny afternoon. There's me, 6'1", pretty slim, sleeves rolled up, just on my beat. The area car, the police car, the blue light, that went by. And as it went by, the driver shouted out, you're probably going to have to bleep this out, black. Members of the public were around. They looked round. I looked embarrassed. I felt so ashamed. And they all laughed and just drove on down. I went into the station, because it's just across the road, the Opera House. I went to the station, went upstairs. I saw the chief superintendent, and I told him what had happened. And he said to me, well, what do you want me to do about it? And I thought, damn, I've lost. Because it's the first time I'd ever complained. And I thought then I've lost because he wasn't interested. But I'd allowed him to see that something had happened to me. Do you understand what I'm saying? You know,
You didn't want to show any vulnerability?
No, I didn't.
But Norwell was determined to stick it out. The more others wanted him to leave, the more determined it made him. Nothing was going to get in his way. He knew he was a pioneer, and he says he was determined not to let anyone down.
I just saw it as a job which had to be done. I did it. I was asked to do it, or given an opportunity to do it, and I'd like to think that I made a success of it. And because I made a success of it, I think in my own eyes, others were able to join. I could have gone the other way and complained to the press or sued the police force. That's not my scene. I don't think it'd have got many people to follow me if I'd have gone along that route, because they'd have thought, well, it can't be any good, don't think I'll join, I'm not having any of that.
By the mid-1970s, there were a few more black officers on the beat, but not many.
Now there are about 40 coloured police compared with 21,000 whites. What will be the effect if these recruiting efforts fail?
I think you'll not only have a polarisation between the different minority groups and the police. But I think you will cause an inevitable lack of confidence, probably totally unjustified, in the police themselves.
Sir Robert Mark was a police commissioner. He said that I'd done more to promote the good relations between the white and the black community than anybody else. And we have cause, his words, to be thankful to him for that.
And I was just wondering how the Afro-Caribbean community saw you as a policeman.
I can remember I was dealing with a burglary in Charing Cross Road in a cafe. I think it was about 11 o'clock at night, when the door opens and a black youth looked in and shouted out, "Judas," because he saw me as a traitor, and then he ran away.
Some of them, they don't know the reason why I've joined the police force. I joined it because I like being a policeman, because I like meeting people, and they obviously think that I'm an Uncle Tom.
But I was never ostracised by my own community. I think they wanted to see it. Lots of black members of the public came up to me when I'm on duty and shook my hand and said, "Hello there, man, it's nice to see you. Nice to see you." And that was heartening to me. It made it all worthwhile.
After Bow Street, Norwell served in other police stations around London. He was promoted and eventually became a detective sergeant. He worked on investigations in CID. He also worked undercover. Did things get better after time?
I felt it was a bit easier once I joined the CID. But then, of course, within the CID, obviously, you then have people who are just nasty. There was a certain amount of jealousy because I was very popular. I think I was amongst the lads. Got away with everybody, and certain elements didn't like it. There was constant sniping throughout the 30 years, but you just have to make the most of it. You didn't sort of go around moaning about it. I kept a lot in to myself, which is not good. I think it's damaged me slightly because I can't forget the bad treatment. What I have learned is that I will see to it and nobody ever goes through in my presence what I went through.
Did you ever think of quitting?
I only ever thought of quitting once. I was having a rough time later on at another police station and I got stress eczema. I don't know if you know what stress eczema is. If you're stressed out, it comes out in the skin. It comes out in lumps in the skin. And I had to go and see a specialist. Nobody knew about it, obviously. But eventually I had to move stations because of it. I went and asked for a transfer. And then I saw out the rest of my service.
In 1996, Norwell Roberts was awarded the Queen's Police Medal for Distinguished Service, for which he is very proud. A year later, he retired after 30 years on the force and now devotes his time to charity work. Around the time he retired, a public inquiry into the Met's handling of the murder of the black teenager Stephen Lawrence concluded that the police force was institutionally racist. Norwell does think there have been changes since then, but there's still a way to go.
It is a lot better, and I think I'd rather be a policeman now than at that time. Would I do it again? Yeah, I'd do it again. I think I dealt with things in the right way for me. What I regret most was that I would like for someone who was about then to come to me and say, "I know what it was like. I'm sorry about that." That's all. But they're always in denial. But I'd like to think that I've been a force for good. And I'm proud of what I've achieved.